you can make a lot of money in foreclosures and distressed properties, but you can do that because the risk is high. A lot of experienced investors, based on the condition of the exterior, have a pretty good idea of what they're going to have to put into that house. And they just make assumptions that certain things are just going to have to be replaced.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. Hello and welcome to episode 130. In today's tight real estate market, it's very hard for investors to find good deals out there. But believe it or not, there are still opportunities in distressed properties, bank-owned properties, and the foreclosure market. And we're going to talk about that market today and how to tap into it. Here to have that conversation with me is Casey O'Neill, who works with auction.com. Casey, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation because obviously 10 years ago, there were a ton of foreclosures, short sales out there, lots of distressed property. That seems to have dried up. And auction.com, though, can help investors out there tap into this market. We're going to talk about that. Before we get into that conversation, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you have a bit of a real estate investing background and how you came to be with auction.com.
Yeah, I in the past have owned rental properties and done my own management for them. Looking at auction.com, I have been with them for over a year. Started with them at the beginning of 2017 and got into working with them after selling my rental property and have been, just working with them trying to help other investors not make a lot of the mistakes that I made, and so that's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it a lot, and look forward to continue doing so.
So tell me how you're doing that. How are you helping investors not make the mistakes that you made?
The one thing I really love about auction.com and what they do is their whole goal is to try to create a lot more transparency in the foreclosure and distressed property world. A lot of those waters are very murky, and it's very difficult for people to navigate through them, especially newer investors. And so, what I've seen and what I've been able to work with a lot of new investors on is how to do their due diligence, a lot of things to look for, pitfalls to watch out for, how to figure out, if it's a good investment or a bad investment. And also, working with existing investors, trying to help them find more deals, find properties that they can invest in. A lot of people who have invested in real estate in the past are, with the changes in the real estate market, are all looking for new ways to invest so that they can continue to buy properties and make money. And using auction.com and some of the platforms that we have have proven to be really great tools for new investors and experienced investors alike.
Now, is that your side of auction.com? Are you working primarily with investors?
Yeah. I pretty much strictly work with investors and try to show them how to use the website both as a research tool and as an investment tool. We try to bring a lot of information into one place on the website so that people can start doing their due diligence and research on properties. But then also banks will use our online auction platform to sell real estate. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in what we can do to help investors.
I think the name kind of says it all, but for those who aren't familiar with auction.com, why don't you tell us what it is and why people might want to go there and look at distressed properties?
Sure. Auction.com, they started over 10 years ago, and kind of they came out of doing live ballroom auctions for banks and some of those types of things. And they saw how the auction model can be really a great way to sell real estate. And as they started looking at the distressed property world and talking to banks and investors, they saw a great need for somebody to be out there trying to show people how to invest in these types of properties. It's very different than just going and buying a house off of the MLS. And so that was kind of how they created the whole concept and came up with this goal of making this market more transparent. So throughout, the last 10, 15 years, have tried to build a name for themselves in the distress market, providing information on their website that helps people start their due diligence. It's a great springboard where people a lot of times will have to go to all over the place to try to find little bits and pieces of information that will help them know if a specific property is a good investment or a bad investment. We try to bring it all onto one page so that they use it as a springboard and save a lot of time as far as starting their due diligence.
Can you take us through what you do with investors to help them with the due diligence so they make sure they're actually paying the right price for a property that's going to turn a profit?
Right. Well, we want people to be investing in foreclosures and in bank-owned properties. So the last thing we want to see is somebody make a mistake the first time and then decide to never do it again. So what we try to do and what I try to do with new investors and experienced investors is try to explain to them the process of a lot of the steps that they need to take in order to have a successful investment. So what we stress a lot is due diligence. Whenever we're talking to people, before we ever tell them to go buy something, we always stress do your due diligence. And what that means is, for one, the biggest thing is looking at the title and knowing what liens are on the property. Are there secondary liens like second mortgages, home equity lines? Are there condo association liens? Are there construction liens? But then also, are there tax liens? And all of those different types of liens can have different implications on how successful that investment is. So the first thing we always tell people is either go to the Register of Deeds or get in touch with a title company so that you can see everybody that has a lien on that property, how much those liens are, and then discuss with a real estate attorney. We always try to stress people find a good foreclosure attorney because they're the ones that are going to be able to say, well, that lien, if you take over the property, you won't be responsible for that, or you will be responsible for that. Paying a real estate attorney to help you out will save you thousands down the road in making some mistakes. So the biggest thing that we stress is look at the title. Is it, are there liens you're going to have to, pay for? So one of them, property taxes, right? If there are property taxes owed from years back on that particular property, you're going to have to pay those. So it's not like that makes it a bad investment. You just have to say if someone owes $3,000 of property taxes, when you go to invest in that house, allocate for that $3,000 so that when you buy it, pay that $3,000, you still make the profit that you're looking to make.
And that typically gets paid at close.
Right. So if you buy a foreclosure at the sheriff's sale, you're going to have to take care of some of like property taxes and that kind of stuff. And it's not really a closing per se, because at the sheriff's sale here in Michigan, you're actually, for the first 6 months, you're just basically buying the mortgage from the bank. In Michigan, we have a redemption period of 6 months. And so if it goes to the sheriff's sale today, you have the homeowner has 6 months from that day to redeem the property back from you, which is basically paying you all of the money that you have into it. They're also on the hook for accrued interest based on the rate of the loan, which over 6 months isn't really that much. But the redemption period, after the redemption period ends, is when you actually take over the property if they don't redeem it from you.
And at that point, you would pay the property taxes.
So no, actually, when you at the sheriff's sale, if you buy the property, certain liens, like a lot of tax liens and stuff like that, are the responsibility of the person who buys it right away. Similar if no one overbids the bank at the foreclosure auction, then the bank will end up a lot of times taking care of those too. So then when they go to resell the property, that money's all factored into what they're trying to get out of it.
Right. So as far as due diligence goes, getting the title work up front is very important.
Yes.
Having an attorney to look at that title work with you and tell you what you need to know as far as what liens are out there. Liens being amounts that are owed on the property to other, it could be a contractor, it could be a bank, it could be a lender or the city. Knowing what those costs are and building that into your acquisition price. What else do you have as far as due diligence?
Some of the other things you want to do, you want to, as much as you can, inspect the property. Typically, foreclosures are occupied, so you can't actually just go inside the house and look at it like you would a property on the MLS. But if you take a contractor with you and you go drive around the house and really look at the outside of it, any real experienced good contractor will be able to see signs of damage or like water damage, for instance, or they'll be able to see particular issues with a foundation just by closely examining the exterior of the property. So as you are kind of figuring out what you would want to pay for that property, one of the things you have to do is figure out what your repair costs are going to be. And so taking that contractor with you, doing as much of an inspection as you can on the exterior will help you come up with a fairly accurate number as far as what those repair costs will be, which then you bring back into the total amount you're going to put into it and what you want to get out of it. Some other things that you want to consider are looking at properties surrounding the one you're looking at. Are a lot of them in foreclosure? Are some of them for sale? One of the nice things is if you have one that's for sale near the house you're looking at, you can, if they have an open house, go into that one. Because in neighborhoods, a lot of times houses were built in a similar era and in similar styles. So if you go into a property that's for sale near the one that's in foreclosure, you can get a pretty good idea of what that house is going to look like on the inside. Obviously, it might have a little more work to do than the one that's for sale that you're at the open house for. But also you can kind of get an idea of the upgrades you're going to need to make in order for it to be a competitive sell in that neighborhood. So if you go into a house that's for sale, they have granite countertops in that property, that's something you may want to consider putting in. If they don't have granite countertops, that's also something you'd want to consider, that you can save some of that money from those types of upgrades because that neighborhood doesn't demand it. So checking out other properties that are for sale in that area can really be helpful as far as knowing what you'll need to do to the one you buy in order for it to be competitive in that market. Obviously, looking at price trends, home values, and sell prices in that neighborhood is going to help you know what you can potentially get out of it. So then you can do some of the math to figure out what you can put into it and still make a profit. Then the last couple things you want to do are look and really research what the rental and zoning and compliance issues are for that particular area. Different cities have different compliance regulations. And so knowing what those are will help you. I know in the city of Grand Rapids, we have a fairly strict code compliance for landlords that they have to follow. Part of your rehab costs you're gonna have to factor in what that particular city or township needs you to do in order for you to be able to legally rent that property out. So researching what that particular city or township's compliance codes are will really help you out in the long run.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. What are some of the risks associated with purchasing those? Because I'd imagine if you can't get into the property, there's huge unknown there as to what the actual cost will be to rehab.
Absolutely. So, the old saying, risk reward, that continuum. You can make a lot of money in foreclosures and distressed properties, but you can do that because the risk is high. And a lot of that risk, we try to mitigate on auction.com. We don't guarantee that we're getting rid of the risk, but we try to help people out. But some of the things that are real risky, like you said, a lot of the foreclosures you can't get into. So you don't really know if it needs a new furnace. You don't really know if it needs a new water heater. You don't know if the previous homeowner ripped out all the copper wire, all the copper plumbing. I've heard stories of where the homeowner ripped it all out and then rehung drywall to make it look like they didn't. And so even if the person got into the house to look at it, they may not have even known that they had to replace all of the plumbing and all of the electrical wiring in the house. So there is that risk that you run, and a lot of experienced investors will be able to, based on the condition of the exterior and some other things that they've learned how to do over time, have a pretty good idea of what they're going to have to put into that house. And they just make assumptions. A lot of times they'll just assume that certain things are just going to have to be replaced, so that if they buy it and those things don't need to get replaced, then it's a bonus, but they plan for it. So you kind of learn how to mitigate risk over time as you do it more and more. So one of the things that I try to encourage new investors in the distressed property world to do is to first look at bank-owned properties. We do bank-owned auctions on auction.com. And if you look at our bank-owned auction platform, when you're just looking at the bank-owned properties, we have more filters that can help people mitigate some of the risk of things that they're scared of. So if people want to be able to see the inside of the house, just so that they can know exactly what they have to do, they don't have to do any guesswork. We, on the bank-owned side, have search filters where they can just search for properties and only see the ones that they can actually go look inside of the house.
So bank-owned properties at that point are probably unoccupied, and investors could get into the property.
Potentially. There's a lot more likelihood that a bank-owned property is not occupied than a foreclosure, but that doesn't mean that all bank-owned properties are not occupied. But if you look at the risk continuum, the bank-owned properties are going to be a little less risky. So I always try to encourage new investors to first start in that world. It helps them learn a lot, and it also helps them make less mistakes because they can actually get inside a property sometimes and see it and know exactly what they need to put into the property without having to do a lot of guesswork.
So what kind of due diligence then is available on the auction.com platform? I mean, what are you going to find when you go online?
So what we've tried to do is put in as much information as we can gather. And so banks typically will know if a property is occupied or not. So they're going to tell us, and we're going to put that right on our website, if it's occupied or if it's unoccupied. We also will put in as much title information as we can get our hands on. That's obviously not guaranteed to be 100% accurate and up to date, but it's very good information to at least start your research. You can kind of get an idea if there are multiple liens on the property or if there's just one. You can get ideas of what you're looking at as far as if you're going to have to take care of certain things or not. And it's a great springboard to go do additional research. We also put in a neighborhood data report that goes into crime statistics for that area. It goes into school district information, weather information. When you have something online, it opens up the investor pool. So you might get people in California who are looking at investing in a property in Grand Rapids, and they have particular criteria for properties that they like to buy. Well, that home disclosure report gives a lot of information to those types of investors, especially on whether it's a good fit for their portfolio or not. So we have that report on there. And then, we try to get pictures of the outside of the house right on the listing. And then we'll put how many bedrooms, bathrooms, that kind of stuff if we can get our hands on that information. We try to find a decent value for the house. It's there's a lot of guesswork and it's not always accurate, but we try to stay in the ballpark just to give people an idea of what they might be able to sell it for if they do end up getting it fixed up and try to flip it. So that's some of it. I mean, depending on the property, could be more information, or could be a little less information, but it's a lot of that due diligence information. We kind of try to bring all into one place.
And talk about the properties themselves. I mean, these are distressed for different reasons. They're in foreclosure, they're bank owned. Where is the pipeline of these properties coming from, and why are they in this situation in the first place?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of reasons people get foreclosed on. Some of the bigger ones, people pass away and then no one's there to pay the mortgage. So obviously then it gets foreclosed on. People lose their jobs and can't pay their mortgage, gets foreclosed on. And then, there are a ton of other reasons too. But typically if the home hasn't been, the mortgage hasn't been kept up on due to a lack of funds, then a lot of the maintenance hasn't been kept up on as well because of the lack of funds. So you're typically getting a property that needs work in the foreclosures and distressed property world, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Now, is it safe to say that the attractiveness of this to an investor is that because they're foreclosed on, they're distressed, you can pick them up for less than you would if they were on the open market? Right,
and that's especially true right now, especially here in Kent County and Grand Rapids, where property values on like the MLS sales just continue to go up and up and up. Investors are trying to find any type of way, and they're trying to get really creative on how to find deals that they can still make money on. And so looking at these distressed properties, because they're distressed, because they haven't been kept up, the maintenance hasn't been done, people obviously aren't going to pay top dollar for them. And so there's some room where investors can come in, buy them for less money, do the work, and then sell them for more money or rent them out and have that long-term revenue as well. The more someone knows about how to fix up a property, the better off they're going to be in these. Or the better contractor they have that's really good at it.
Yeah. So ideally, as an investor, you would have a team, including a contractor who could help you really assess what the rehab cost is going to be.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we try to encourage people and teach people to do is getting their team together.
Mm-hmm. And who do you like to see on the team?
That team would consist of like the foreclosure attorney that really understands all the nuances of this world, that can help people navigate some of the legalities of it. A good contractor is great to have. Or if you have, a list of subcontractors that you use regularly, plumbers, electricians, HVAC, roofers, painters, all of that stuff. If you have all of those people that you can just call up and say, hey, I need this. Part of the game right now is all of these tradespeople are so incredibly busy that if you don't have someone that you work with regularly, you end up being on the bottom of the list. And so when you buy a foreclosure or a bank owned, you're putting cash into it. You want to get that return out as soon as possible. And the last thing you want to have to do is find out need a water heater put in and you're on a waiting list and have to wait, 4 weeks before they can come do it. So, getting these subcontractors or a good contractor that can make a phone call and have someone out there is pretty critical to how successful you're going to be. Having a good real estate agent is another person to have on your team. And for two reasons. Number one, if you use them regularly, they're going to give you comps and they're not going to, and they'll do it quickly for you. So if you're looking at a property and you want to know what you think you could sell it for if you get it fixed up, a realtor that knows that area can give you comps pretty quick if you work with them. And so having that agent on your team that that if you see one you're interested in, you want to know if it's a good investment or not, you can call up, get comps, and then do your math on how much you have to put into it to get to that point. You can figure out if it's a pretty good investment rather quickly. On the other side of the coin, having an agent that you work with regularly, especially if you're a house flipper, is pretty crucial. So as soon as you get your house done, having someone that you know does well, sells properties quickly on your team is going to be obviously a huge deal. I know there are a lot of studies done on selling your house for sale by owner or using an agent, and study after study shows you get significantly more by using an agent than if you try to do it for sale by owner, enough that it covers the commission you pay them, plus you get to pocket more money. So having a good agent is always going to be helpful if you're trying to flip a property to make as much money as possible.
Take me through the process of an investor who would go to auction.com looking for this type of property.
Well, the first thing is that I try to tell any investor is to have a focus. Don't just try to be everywhere all at once. And so find an area where you can invest in and be successful. So you go on auction.com, you have an area, you can search for foreclosures, for bank-owned properties, or both, by zip code, by county, by city. And then, once you've got that geographic area pinned down, then, it's just a matter of, on our website, either setting up alerts for certain areas that meet certain criteria. Then anytime one of those pops up on our website, you can get an email about it. So you can start doing your research right away. If there's a particular property that you're interested in, there's a way on auction.com that you can actually star it. So then if the status of that property changes, like if it's a foreclosure and it's kind of pending and it gets adjourned, you'll get an email saying, hey, it was adjourned. You'll get an email saying, hey, it's supposed to go to the sale. That's not a guarantee. Properties can get adjourned right up until the sale starts. So, but you can at least kind of get notified of any status changes in that foreclosure. Or on the bank-owned side, if they do an auction and it doesn't hit a reserve, when they put that property back up for auction, you get an email saying, hey, we just started a new auction for this property, so you can get back on and keep bidding. But that way, setting alerts for either a specific property or a certain market, you can get alerts, and so that you can get back on quickly, either continuing to research a particular property that just came up, or start continue to bid on a property that you're interested in.
So let's talk about the bidding and the auction process. I mean, are you going to a live auction that auction.com is directing you to, or can you actually bid online?
So here in Michigan, foreclosure auctions are done through the sheriff, and they're done at a courthouse. Each county has them once a week. If they don't have any, obviously they don't have an auction, but they're scheduled once a week in a county courthouse. In order to bid, you have to go to the sale. So if you're interested in properties in Kent County, then every Wednesday at 10 a.m., you got to be at the courthouse in the courtroom that we do the sale in, and bid on them live. As far as the bank-owned auctions go, those we do on auction.com. So if you download the app, you can be anywhere where you have a cell phone signal, and you can be bidding on a property.
So when you go to auction.com, some of them you would have to show up live at the auction, the sheriff's sale. Some of them you can bid online.
Right. So
it just depends on where they're coming from.
In order for a property to be bank owned, which are the auctions we do on our website, it has to go through the foreclosure auction. So if it goes to the foreclosure sale, which is live at a courthouse, and it doesn't sell there, no one bids over the bank, then it goes back to the bank, and then at that point is when banks will start working on getting it on auction.com to auction it off online.
So as an investor who might be interested in buying something off of auction.com, what is the cost to the investor?
The only cost to the investor is buying a property. everything to the investor, the information, bidding on something, it's all free. If you want to register to bid for a particular property, we will do a hold on your credit card, but it's just a hold. So that lasts the duration of the auction. So when the auction's over, it's released and your card isn't ever actually charged. So the only time an investor will pay money is if they bid and win a property in the bank-owned auction. Everything else to an investor on auction.com is going to be free. All of the information regarding particular properties or regarding foreclosure markets or bank-owned property markets, all of that information we have accessible to investors for free.
Okay, so and if you do bid and you get the property, talk me through the bidding process. I mean, so
sure.
I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
the sheriff's sale is one thing. You go
Yep.
to the sheriff's sale, you're going to bid in the room. But online, how does the bidding process work? And then what happens if you don't get the property, and what happens if you do get the property?
So if you are interested in a particular property that is scheduled to be auctioned off on our online auction platform, that's a bank-owned asset, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to do your due diligence. We put up those properties 3 weeks ahead of the first auction date so that you have plenty of time to go research the property, research the neighborhood, understand what you can sell that property for or what you can rent it for, and then do all of your math on rehab costs and taking care of anything else, and which can bring you to what your highest bid should be. And that's all just based on what you want to do and what you want to make off of that property.
Is there an indication of what the minimum bid is?
Nope. So most of the properties that we have a bank-owned auction for will have a reserve, and banks set the reserve, and it's usually not disclosed. When you're actively bidding on a property, they're very in plain sight on that particular property page. During the auction will tell you if the reserve has been met or if it's not met. So you'll know kind of if you haven't hit that threshold yet or not. They don't disclose what that number is though. So once you have your due diligence done, the auction's about to start online. They go for, usually ours go in West Michigan, Kent County, from a Friday to a Tuesday. And so what you would do is you would click on that property, and then in that property page, click on register to bid. This takes you through, some basic information about you. This is where we would do the $2,500 hold on your credit card. If you've been working with an agent, some of our bank-owned auctions have a broker co-op. So when you're registering to bid, this is where you would register this agent as your agent. If you end up winning that property and buying it, then the agent would get a small commission for being your agent and helping you through the process. But so you'd register to bid, go through all that information, and then from there, it's just simply deciding what if you want to bid and what bid amount you want to put in there. And we always stress knowing what your high bid is and to not go over that. And so at that point, it's just like any other auction. You bid against people. And one of the things that we've done is if you are the high bidder and the auction has 30 seconds left, and someone swoops in at the last second and outbids you, it extends the auction for a couple minutes so that you have time to decide if you want to bid over that new high bidder.
So you're not just going to wait till the last 10 seconds, put in your high bid, and then win it. It's going to reset the clock.
So that you can't swoop in and try to, pull the carpet out from someone else's feet. And so we end up getting a legitimate high bid. Mm-hmm. And at that point, if your bid hits the reserve, then and you're the winning bidder, and the bank's going to sell you the property. Within a fairly short amount of time, a day or two, you'll get a call from auction.com, and they'll tell you, give you an account to wire an earnest money deposit, which is 5% of the winning amount. Some of our properties have a buyer's premium on them, which is a fairly standard auction thing. Some of them don't, and that just depends on if the bank's going to pay it or if the buyer pays it. We'll call you. We'll say, this is where you wire your 5% earnest money deposit and if it applies, your buyer's premium. And then we'll have you send your proof of funds for the remaining balance. Most of our closings go 45 to 60 days out. I've talked to some people that closed in just a few weeks, and sometimes they take even longer than 60 days. It just depends on the property.
Why does it take so long?
Well, you have to remember, these aren't clean all the time, clean properties to sell. And so they tend to require a little bit more paperwork, and just to get all of that processed and set it up so that it can be transferred over, just can end up taking a little bit more time. And then when you close, it's a fairly typical closing for what people are used to when they buy a property.
So what happens if a buyer or investor wins the property, but then changes their mind?
We don't like to see that happen, obviously. We want people to buy properties. Banks use us because we're successful at getting buyers for their properties. There are cases where people have done that. If that does happen, auction.com tries to be understanding. I mean, sometimes there are valid reasons for it. Other times there aren't. But if it's a habitual thing, it can lead to that where we just won't allow them to bid anymore.
Yeah, because I'm wondering after they might win an auction, do they then get the opportunity to get into the property? And would that change the investor's mind?
Again, that depends. So some of the bank-owned auctions are done during the redemption period. Property's still occupied. So they wouldn't be able to just go get into the property like they would want to, take it over, start the work, and do what they want to do. We disclose that the property is still within the redemption period, if it is. Mm-hmm. And if it is still in the redemption period, then if you're bidding on it, you just need to know two things, which you can get from the Register of Deeds or some other places as well. You need to know the date that it went to the foreclosure auction, because that'll tell you how much time is left on the redemption period. It's just 6 months from the foreclosure sale. And then you also need to know what the bank bid at the foreclosure sale, because that amount is the redemption amount. No matter what you buy it for at the bank-owned auction, the redemption amount that the homeowner has to pay in order to take the house back is what it went for at the foreclosure sale. So if
so that could be more or that could be less than what you
exactly. So knowing those two pieces of information will help you out and help you make a decision on what you should bid on that particular property.
So let's talk about the flip side of that equation then. I mean, we've talked about investors and how you work with investors. What about sellers? Who does auction.com typically sell properties for?
Yep. So we deal with predominantly either national or larger regional lending institutions. So like your Chase Bank, your Quicken Loans, Bank of America, those larger lending institutions that tend to have more distressed properties in their portfolio. Auction.com is in all 50 states, so we're nationwide. And so we typically end up dealing with banks that have properties in multiple states, just because that's kind of the relationships that we've built. And
so if I'm an individual and I want to sell a property, would I be able to sell it through auction.com?
No. There are some companies that would do that, that are a little bit smaller and handle more local or smaller regional institutions that would probably take that on. That's just not something that we do. It's not economical to do that for us. Just being as big as we are, the economics come into play where it only makes sense for us to deal with companies that have assets around the country.
And then let's talk a little bit about foreclosure law, especially here in the state of Michigan, because I know you have an opinion on that and what may or may not need to change.
Yeah, well, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a foreclosure attorney by any stretch, but I have seen a lot of foreclosure issues, just going to foreclosure auctions and talk to a lot of people. And some of the things that I'd love to see change, obviously being from auction.com, we'd love to see foreclosure auctions be able to be done online. It really increases the investor pool. It increases the transparency of the foreclosures if you can do them and offer them in a way that people have a lot more access to it. And then the other side of it is, our redemption period in Michigan, the way it's set up, it's fairly unique as far as if you look at other states around the country. And the way it's set up, it doesn't really serve to help the homeowners in the way that it's intended to, but it also limits people's desire to invest in foreclosures because they know that they might put a significant amount of money out there for 4 or 5 months and then it not actually give them any sort of return. And so it limits a lot of people that would normally come invest in foreclosures that choose not to because of it. And so I'd love to see our redemption period change. I'd love to see where if people buy at the foreclosure sale in fairly short order, they actually are buying the property, not just the note for 6 months. And I'd also love to see us change how foreclosures, non-judicial foreclosures are handled in Michigan so that we can actually do them online and let a bigger pool of investors bid on those properties and also do it in a way that increases the transparency of the whole foreclosure market in Michigan.
And when you say do it online, that would be as opposed to going to a sheriff's sale.
Right. Yeah. Right now they have to go. You have to go to the courthouse in order to bid on a property. And one of the caveats to that is, on Thursdays, for example, you've got 15, 20 or more foreclosure auctions happening at the same time. Last I checked, I can only be in one place at one time. And so if we are able to switch to being able to do them online, then all of a sudden one investor can bid on properties in multiple counties at once, which can only serve to help reduce those blighted properties and blighted areas a little bit faster than we do now.
So as we wrap it up, Casey, any parting thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, we, as a company, we want to see people invest in foreclosures, invest in bank-owned properties. The waters tend to be very murky, and our goal is to clear those waters up. We want to help people in any way that we can. We don't want to see people make bad investments. We don't want to see people throw their money away, which is why we try to give them information on our website. It's why we make it available and free for people because we want people to go to auction.com and we want them to look at all of the information on a property so that we mitigate some of that risk and see people make good investments. Outside of auction.com on the website, I try to go meet with investors and talk to them and share the same information that we have on our website with them to help them not make those mistakes and to try to steer them in the right direction.
And how would an investor get a hold of you if they had questions?
They can call auction.com and auction.com will put people in touch with me locally, or if they're in a different state, they can always call auction.com and say, hey, I'd love to meet with someone that can work with me. We have people in I believe almost every state that do the same work that I do. So they can just call up our customer service, and our customer service will always put them in touch with a person that's closest to them, geographically speaking.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today and tell us about auction.com and give us tips on the due diligence process and better understanding of foreclosures and distressed properties. Thank you.
I really appreciate you having me. Thanks a lot.
This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.